Rallies outside the U.S. Supreme Court this week. The justices reviewing a Texas law that would shut down all but about 10 clinics that perform abortions in Texas and set tougher regulations for hospitals.
Texas cares about our women. That is what this is all about. Women's health and quality of care for whatever kind of decision they choose to make.
Women are hurting, and they're hurting in the state of Texas and the state of Louisiana and all across this country because legislatures are passing bills that keep women from health care that they need, and we will not stand for it.
And joining us to talk about the Texas case and, more importantly, the impact on the rest of the country is Josh Wilson, a DU professor who has written a book on the politics behind this Texas bill. Let's start with first, just why is abortion still probably the most heated topic in this country right now, even after all these years?
Yeah, so the popularity, for lack of a better term, of abortion in terms of a topic has kind of ebbed and flowed over time. But it's really had a resurgence lately because state politicians, basically state legislatures, have been trying to push the limits on what they can do to regulate abortion. So we've had a shift from in the 1980s and 90s where you had more kind of frontal assaults on Roe versus Wade, trying to overturn Roe versus Wade directly, to a recalculation and recalibration to chip away at, to engage in an incremental politics of abortion, which really came to kind of national attention when Texas was trying to pass these laws, and we had the filibuster that kind of made the public aware of what had really been going on for about 20 years.
Now, this Texas case that is the first real big case that the Supreme Court is going to hear since the death of Justice Scalia, what's the impact of the 8 justices hearing this case, and how will it impact Texas, and how could it impact the country?
Yeah, no, so it's quite interesting, because you have 8 justices, and kind of popular opinion is that it's likely to come out in a 4-4 split. And if it's a 4-4 split, typically when the Supreme Court rules, whatever they decide rules for the entire country. But if you have a 4-4 split, the case only applies to the district that it came out of, or rather the circuit court that it came out of. So it would be Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi would be covered by this ruling. And so if that happens, what will likely happen in the future, too, is we'll have differences in law across the country, which will encourage the Supreme Court to hear another case in the not-too-distant future.
So what are the trends that you're seeing across the country in terms of different sets of laws?
Well, they tend to, while you get variation within them, they tend to follow similar themes, basically. So you have a class of laws being litigated in this case is generally they're termed TRAP laws, or targeted regulation of abortion provider laws. And so, as I was saying before, instead of having a frontal assault on Roe, you try to chip away at access. And so one of the ways that you can do that is by regulating the physical clinic itself. And what's happened in Texas is you change the specifications for what the facility needs to be like, and that forces a lot of facilities to then close. You can also do things in terms of staffing and doctor requirements. This is what we oftentimes hear about, doctors needing to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. So you find these same basic themes that go on in conservative state legislatures across the country. But like I said, you do get some variation within there.
There are a handful of bills at the state legislature here dealing with abortion, and we know because it's a Democratic House and a Democratic governor, they really have no chance of getting far. One of them is new to me, that it would regulate abortion clinics under the realm of the Attorney General, that the Attorney General would have to go inspect and do these things that, to me, like, that's not the Attorney General's job. They're getting creative now with some of these bills. How does that work?
Yeah, no, and that's, you used the exact right word, which is they're getting creative. Right. So while we do have kind of a set playbook that anti-abortion activists kind of pull from and push for in legislatures, you're also always looking to experiment, to see, what might you be able to push forward, what might give you some sort of political or strategic advantage within your state. And if it works within your state, then it can translate over and go into other states as well that are looking to do the same thing.
So I think what you're saying is that this issue will never be resolved?
Yeah, exactly. So typically what happens, what really has been the theme over the last 20-plus years, you can even extend it back from there, is that states experiment. They put out some piece of legislation. It then gets litigated. Courts rule on it. That resets the parameters of what's possible. And so you go back to the drawing board and you see what you can push forward with given those new parameters that are set by the court. So you're right, nothing gets resolved. It's more of just kind of changing form and continuing to go.
If the Texas case ends up in a 4-4 tie at the Supreme Court, could it be heard again once the Supreme Court has 9 justices?
Yeah, so what will, well, there's lots of different variations of what can happen, but likely what would happen is you'd get a case from a different circuit court that would then come up. But again, because we have these themes across the way regulation works, you would have a similar enough case coming out of another state that would then be challenged and could be heard in the next year or two.
Is there ever a shelf life? Does this topic ever go away?
No. Yeah, it seems to never go away. Even though it's interesting to kind of watch the court. This is really the biggest Supreme Court case dealing with abortion in the last 20-plus years, really since 1992 in Casey. And as you're saying, kind of the shelf life, does it ever go away? No, but the court has actively tried to not hear these kinds of cases, but especially the 4-4 split.
But here we are, yes.
It can continue it.
All right, Josh Wilson, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We'll be right back.